Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Nicholas Richardson and this is the news. President Andrzej Duda has given the task of forming a government to representatives of the party with the most support, Law and Justice. However, the party has a maximum of 6 weeks in which to form a government that commands a majority in the lower house of parliament. The opposition parties, which together won a majority of seats in parliament, are demanding that their representatives be entrusted with forming a government as soon as possible. Konrad Chmieła has more. Law and Justice has 194 seats, the Civic Coalition 157, Third Way 65, the Left 26 and Confederation 18. The first session of the newly elected Sejm is opened by the senior marshal or the oldest politician elected to the lower house. The marshal or speaker of the Sejm is then elected by an absolute majority of votes cast in the presence of at least half the statutory number of deputies. Only after his election and within 14 days of the first meeting or acceptance of the resignation of the previous Council of Ministers, the President appoints a Prime Minister and the government. The new Prime Minister must obtain a vote of confidence by an absolute majority. If this fails, the Constitution provides for further steps. The President is the last redoubt in the defence of Poland's independence, and I have reason to believe that Poland's independence and sovereignty are at risk if the opposition take over government positions, especially at a time of cooperation between Berlin and the European Union. Even before the elections, President Andrzej Duda announced that he would entrust the task of forming a government to the winning party. However, in order to achieve the required majority, Law and Justice will need to win an additional 37 seats, which it is likely to seek from Confederation and PSL MPs. There are several weeks of intense political action ahead. As a first step, everything is in the hands of the President and, contrary to the voices that appear in the media, the President will exercise his constitutional powers with a view to constitutional tradition and the good of Poland. It is possible that Law and Justice will stay in power. We can point to common programme elements when it comes to Law and Justice and parts of some opposition formations. If the Council of Ministers is not appointed or the government fails to win a vote of confidence, the Prime Minister is elected by the Sejm. This requires an absolute majority of votes. In this scenario, a new government must be formed by the 26th of December at the latest. However, it may be difficult to form a government with a divided opposition. If a government cannot be formed at this stage, the initiative will revert to the President, who will nominate a candidate for Prime Minister. In this case, a simple majority is required, with at least half the MPs present. 116 seats may be sufficient to form a government. The Polish parties are divided. The Civic Platform is made up of several parties, so is the Third Way and the Left. These are the things which make this group highly conflicted ideologically, and their electorates are on opposite sides. Much depends on which side the Third Way MPs take. Before the elections, they announced that they would enter the Sejm as two separate clubs, but recent statements by their leaders show that they are now wavering. There will be 34 Law and Justice senators in the Senate. From the Civic Coalition, 41, from the Third Way, 11, 9 from the New Left and 5 independent candidates qualified. In total, 66 senators from the Senate Pact will sit in the Senate. The Senate Pact was formed against Law and Justice. Opposition candidates campaigned very hard. The senatorial candidates were very active in their districts, and the senatorial pact won. If a government cannot be elected in one of the 3 steps provided for in the Constitution, the President of the Republic of Poland will shorten the term of the Sejm and call new parliamentary elections. Illegal migration was one of the key issues in last Sunday's general election in Poland. The outgoing government opposed the European Union's Migration Pact, which provides for the mandatory relocation of unwanted migrants to the bloc's border countries, namely Poland. Now politicians in the new cabinet are hinting that they might reconsider the country's tough stance. Łukasz Zmuda of Televizja Republika has more. Spanish media report overcrowded centres for foreigners in the Canary Islands. 2 Spanish islands, Fuerteventura and Lanzarote, are located 100 and 150 kilometres from mainland Africa. Since the beginning of the year, over 22,000 migrants have arrived in the archipelago. The European Union is trying to respond to the crisis. The pact proposed by Brussels imposes compulsory admission of migrants. The package talks about illegal migration. This is human trafficking. It will not be thousands, but tens of thousands. This document surrenders the border control to the European Union, and they'll not let several thousands of migrants to Poland, but many, many more. The Polish government opposes the solutions proposed by EU bureaucrats. According to Law and Justice, the document only encourages illegal migration. The Migration Pact is extremely dangerous. It contains 2 rules. The first is that the European Commission ultimately decides how many illegal immigrants each member state should accept. The second is that the penalty for not accepting an illegal migrant is not €22,000, but it may be as much as determined by European officials. The European People's Party has been pushing for the Migration Pact for many weeks. The members of this faction in the European Parliament are representatives of the Civic Platform and the Polish People's Party. If the future government will consist of three opposition parties, Civic Platform, Third Way and New Left, the pact may be adopted in a very short time. Part of the Polish opposition claims that the Migration Pact cannot be adopted in its current form. In this form it can be changed. After all, we helped so many people during the war in Ukraine. In a nationwide referendum to the question, do you support the admission of thousands of illegal immigrants from the Middle East and Africa in accordance with the forced relocation mechanism imposed by the European bureaucracy, 98.6% replied no. Despite such a clear voice of Polish society, the vote is non-binding because the turnout did not exceed 50% of eligible voters. It is sad that Poles were fooled by this thoughtless action of the opposition into not taking part in the vote. Are you in favour of illegal migration, letting migrants enter Poland? And Poles allowed themselves to be fooled to boycott this question and gave permission for Donald Tusk to do it. During the parliamentary elections, alarm signals were sent from all over Poland about breaking the electoral silence and agitating against the referendum. Members of the election committees and polling station asked questions that were not permitted by law, such as whether the person who wanted to vote wanted to receive a referendum ballot paper. According to Marian Kowalski, there were also other irregularities. 1,000 were added to the list of 2,000 eligible people. There was a risk that these people could vote elsewhere. Yesterday, the chairman of the European People's Party, Manfred Weber, congratulated Donald Tusk on his election result. Very good news from Poland. Poles turned out in droves to open a new era for the country. Big congratulations to our friend Donald Tusk, the Civic Platform and partners from the opposition, who brought a message of hope. Nobody will stand in the way of Poland and its European future. Tusk now has his hands untied. The entire boycott operation carried out by all opposition parties has resulted in the referendum not blocking Brussels' actions, and Morawiecki's veto can be overturned. Between 2019 and 2021, more than 1,500 people were detained in EU member states on suspicion of terrorism-related offences. There have been 15 terrorist attacks in 2021 alone. As a result of the Hamas attack on Israel and retaliatory operation in the Gaza zone, an uncontrolled influx of migrants from the Middle East seems inevitable, and with it we may be exposed to another wave of terrorist attacks. The question now is, will the new Polish government oppose the resettlement and save Poles from the horrors of so-called cultural enrichment, or will it bow to EU pressure and let the migrants in exchange for a pat on the back from EU bureaucrats? Belgian authorities have confirmed that the person who has been found and shot by the police in Brussels is the gunman who killed two Swedish citizens in the Belgian capital on Monday, RTBF Radio said on its website. Two Swedes were killed in Brussels after a gunman opened fire in the city centre, police have said. Footage shared online showed a man dressed in an orange jacket discharging several shots using a large weapon. The bearded man was reportedly seen leaving the crime scene on a scooter. He identified himself as a member of the Islamic State and claimed responsibility in a video posted online. On Tuesday, Belgian police shot and wounded a 45-year-old Tunisian suspect. The man was shot by police in a cafe and died in hospital from his wounds, media said. The violent incident came ahead of a qualifying game for the UEFA Euros between Sweden and Belgium at the Heysel Stadium, some 3 miles away. Local outlets reported a nervous atmosphere near to the arena following reports of the shooting, and extra security measures were applied. The second half of the match was later called off after players reportedly refused to return to the field. A message from the Swedish FA sent to supporters advised fans to remain inside the stadium. Ukraine claimed to have carried out one of the most destructive attacks on Russian air assets since the beginning of the war. President Zelensky said the assault used longer-range ballistic missiles donated by the United States. Ukraine's Special Operations Forces claimed they destroyed 9 Russian helicopters at 2 airfields in Russian-occupied regions in a nighttime attack. Zelensky's announcement came hours after a United States official revealed that the longer-range ballistic missiles sought for months by Kiev and promised by President Joe Biden had been delivered quietly and are in battlefield use. Missiles also hit military equipment, an air defense system, ammunition warehouses and runways. Dozens of Russian military personnel were injured in the attack, codenamed Operation Dragonfly, it said. Today, special thanks to the United States. Our agreements with President Biden are being implemented very accurately. ATA, CMS proved themselves. The weapons development piles pressure on the Kremlin as both sides look for battlefield advantages ahead of winter and what is shaping up as a protracted war of attrition. While some versions of the missile can go as far as 180 miles, the official said that the ones that went to Ukraine have a shorter range and carry cluster munitions, making them suitable for attacks on airfields. That's the news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for the weather, Poland Daily Business and more programmes. But from me, it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.